That will be all of our reality one day. We're all going to be eulogized. People will say things about us and the way we lived our lives. What will they say? Did we love God? Did we serve others? Did we reach out? Did we take risks? Did we make plans with a grain of salt, understanding that sometimes they don't work out, and take the risk to be generous anyway? Or did we keep it all because our life was all about me instead of we? Scripture reading this morning is Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. Again, this is the parable of the rich fool. Hear the word of the Lord. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I borrowed today's sermon title from my mentor, my hero. His name is Rich Vincent. He titled a sermon on this same text, "I, me, mine." I, me, mine. And if that sounds familiar to you, it was originally a Beatles song written by George Harrison, one of the members of the Beatles. George was probably the most spiritual of the Beatles. Their songs often have spiritual themes in them, but George was known for his spiritual quest. He went all over the world seeking some kind of unity, some kind of more. He had all of the basic needs that could possibly be met in this life, all the money in the world, but he found that wasn't satisfying, so he went on this quest. He had this deep desire to know if there was something more, and this song that he wrote, "I, me, mine," expresses his discovery of how the self can get out of control. That at the heart of our problems is the inherent selfishness of making everything orbit around ourselves so that all our life is about us. I, me, mine. Which brings me to the question that drives our gospel reading. What's wrong with this rich fool? What did he do wrong? It's not really his wealth that's the problem here. The wealth just facilitates his selfishness. It gives greater opportunity to be self-absorbed than if he were poor. The real problem is his intense focus on the self. It's all about him. If you were listening, you heard all of these first-person pronouns. He says, "I did this, I did that, I will do this, my barn, my goods, my soul." His whole life revolves around himself. He makes his whole life about his possessions and the security that they give him, but he fails to experience what life is really all about, and that is connecting with God and connecting with others. So I want to look at this story with you. Luke places this before us as a clear warning from Jesus. And this warning comes about because a man in the crowd that Jesus is teaching wants Jesus to do his job. Jesus was a rabbi, and one of the rabbi's jobs was to settle family disputes. So if you had a dispute, you would bring that disagreement to the rabbi, and the rabbi would arbitrate it. Whatever the rabbi says goes, end of story, that's that. A certain brother, a certain man, seeks this kind of service from Jesus. He interrupts Jesus' teaching because he's upset that he's not received his share of his family's inheritance. And he demands that Jesus arbitrate that dispute, that he settles this disagreement. And Jesus refuses. He says, "No way, Jose. Who made me responsible for that? I'm not doing that. I'm not here to enter family squabbles." And I don't blame him for not entering into that situation. And you probably don't either if you know how nasty inheritance battles can get. The question of who gets mom and dad's stuff? Who gets mom and dad's house? Who gets the classic car? Who gets the business, etc., etc.? Fill in the blank. You also know, if you've experienced this, that when you bring a lawyer into things, when you bring a third party to arbitrate where the inheritance goes, that things have already fallen apart, that the relationships are already broken, and it's all because of stuff. Possessions, material things, money, because somebody wants what somebody else wants. And that's what's happening here. This is our situation, but Jesus won't address it. He says, "I'm not going to settle this dispute." Instead, he will deal with what he sees as the real problem here in verse 15. He says, "Take care." In other words, be on alert, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Now, if you know Jesus, you know this is a very common subject for him. We tend to think otherwise. We tend to get hung up on sexual sins. Imagining Jesus going around teaching, don't lust, don't lust, don't lust, and he does that sometimes. But his much, much bigger concern throughout his ministry is watch out for greed. Watch out for the self-absorbed life. Beware of making life all about you and nothing about God and nothing about others. This is one such warning of his. Is put very bluntly, he says, your life does not consist in the stuff that you have, which is relevant to our culture because we live in a game show society. I love game shows. I love watching people win. I love seeing people get excited about earning money. I think we would all love to go on what's that show with the spinning wheel? Wheel of Fortune, and get rich. That'd be awesome. We all would love for the lottery to fall in our favor, to win whatever it is that signed in the way to Houston, 450 million or whatever it is. We all hope to somehow, once and for all, secure enough finances that we are able to protect and preserve, and that allows us to live a life of ease. It sounds good, but the problem is, enough is pretty elusive. Enough is hard to define. When you ask yourself, what would be enough for me to feel like I'm protected and preserved and I can live a life of ease forever? Is it 1 million? Is it 2 million? Or no matter how much you have, as Howard Hughes says, is it always just a little bit more? Jesus knows there is a deception, an illusion to wealth. So he gives this warning label. He knows that even if we achieve whatever that dream number is for us, that it won't provide what we hope it will. It won't guarantee that life is safe and secure. There are inherent dangers involved in putting that much stock in possessions. And he makes this point with a parable. A parable is a story that we hear so that we don't just hear beware of greed, but we hear an example of greed. This is a successful, fortunate, savvy businessman who's done well for himself. He has amassed a fortune, such a fortune that he has one main question of concern as he dialogues with himself in verse 17. He thought to himself, so this is kind of an inner dialogue, I've got so much. What should I do? I have no place to store it. That's That's his biggest problem. And what a problem to have. What do I do with my extravagant, extreme abundance? And he ultimately decides, well, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my small barns, and I'll build bigger barns so that I can cram all my stuff in there. And he actually may be thinking of an Old Testament story, the story of Joseph from the book of Genesis. Because in that story, to secure Joseph's future, he built barns so that there'd be food for people during years of famine. Famine that Pharaoh predicted in his dreams, if you recall that story. But this isn't like Joseph's situation. This is different. This rich man is not building barns so that there will be food for other people in hard times like Joseph did. In this man's mind, it's good to build bigger barns because, well, it's in the Bible. It's biblical after all. I'll have plenty of stuff. I'll be secure. I'll get to say to myself, no need to worry anymore. Life's a breeze from here on out. You've got it made. Nothing will deter your eating, drinking, and merrymaking for the rest of your life. Nothing will disturb the chill, the comfort, the security that you have. Now, if you stop there, it actually kind of seems reasonable. If you don't read verse 20, you might think, well, actually, he's a smart guy. He's thinking ahead. He's planning his future. He's got plenty of investments. He's done what most of us would tell him to do. He's got it made as a result of his good decisions. It seems like a pretty wise guy overall until you hear God's evaluation in verse 20. Because Jesus says, here's what God thinks about this. You fool. You foolish man. Why? Because this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? And the answer is they're not going to be his. They will belong to his family. So that his family can squabble and fight over who's going to get what from this abundance that he left behind. And Jesus' point in this story is that life is more than our possessions. That's the story. Upon reflection, we ought to ask, again, the question that drives this story is, what does the rich man do wrong? And I think it's important to clarify what he doesn't do wrong, because some of us are perhaps in these categories. He doesn't involve himself in foul play. He's not stealing from people. He doesn't amass his wealth through great injustice. We're not told he treats workers poorly. There's no criminal activity. He's careful, he's conservative, he's smart, he's savvy. These are all good things. The problem is at the center of it all, there's no one but him. His possessions, his life, his plans for the future have no reference to anyone else whatsoever. Nothing in his thoughts even considers that there are other people out there who might benefit from his abundance. And there's certainly nothing in his thoughts that considers what God might have to say about his abundance, about how he lives, about how he uses his possessions. Again, just look at this inner dialogue. And I always think, like, an inner dialogue, you ever call yourself by name and it's like, oh, Jared, come on, you know better. And he's kind of having that sort of conversation with himself. What should I do? I have nowhere to store my crops. I will do this. I will pull down, I will store, I will say to you hear all the first person pronouns? My barns, my grain, my goods, my soul. No reference to God, no reference to others. This man stands completely alone. The universe revolves around him. He's a fool, but he's not a fool because he's wealthy. And he's not a fool because he saves for the future. He's a fool because he lives only for himself. He's been deceived by the lure of wealth because he believes that he can secure his life through his possessions. But this passage isn't primarily about the dangers of wealth. Wealth, again, just kind of exposes what's already there. It facilitates the selfishness that's already there. His ego, his ability to orbit everything around him. It allows him to have an illusion of security because that's what abundance can do if we're not careful. It can delude us into thinking that we are secure because of our stuff. everything is going according to plan because we thought it out and allocated our resources in the right way. But we know this: rich or poor, things rarely go according to plan. Our lives rarely, if ever, go according to the plan that we originally make. No matter how much wealth you have, it's not a guarantee of security for the future. And again, if you do make wealth your security, the question is always, how much is enough? And the answer, if you're self-absorbed like this guy, is it doesn't matter what the number is. It's never enough. The band Kansas, their song Dust in the Wind, puts it like this: all your money won't another minute buy. It's just dust in the wind. The rich fool fails to understand this. He's foolish because he tries to secure his life through possessions, which means that they have become his God. They've become his idol. They have taken that ultimate place in his life. He in no way acknowledges God who gave him the abundance in the first place. In fact, his wealth has turned him away from God. He has placed ultimate allegiance in himself and himself alone, in the hope that he can guarantee his security through his wealth, through his stuff. Now, that's a bunch of bad news, and it's my job to give you good news. And there is some good news here. Jesus doesn't only warn about the dangers of greed. He shows us the right way in verse 21. He says, "So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves. They are like this fool." They end up not getting what they hope for, the security they hope for. But here is another way. You can be rich toward God. The rich man loves himself. He loves his wealth with no thought for God whatsoever. But how different God's evaluation might have been if he used his abundance differently. If he had chosen, instead of storing it away and battening down the hatches for himself against hard days, if he had chosen to show generosity, if he had thought of others, if he had considered God's call again and again throughout the scriptures to remember the poor, that what you have is not your own, it's a gift from God. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the psalmist says. That you have been given what you have as a steward, called to invest in things that God cares about. Not just what you care about, not just your own self-orbiting universe. It doesn't all just have to sit there and rot away in barns. It could be used for so much more. Sadly, this man was a fool, not because he had money, but because money had him. He was possessed by it. He was taken by the cancer of covetousness. He didn't rightly answer the question, what will I do with my abundance? How will I steward the gifts that God has given me? And that's the question that we all need to answer. What will I do with my abundance? Will we pile up treasure for ourselves? Will we show generosity and walk in the faithful way God invites us to? What will we invest in? Will we invest in the kingdom of the self? Or will we invest in the kingdom of God? Will it be I, me, mine? Or love God and love others? Will it be me? Or will it be we? From the children's sermon. There's one last piece here. And this could have been a separate sermon, but I'm tacking it on here at the end. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes it takes an unexpected turn. You make plans and things happen. Nothing has gone according to the plan I made for my life. I never expected I would be here right now in front of you. And I think that's true for all of us. Much of what we plan just doesn't happen. But this man is naive enough to think that he can make it happen. That he can secure his future with a plan. That it's all squared away and he knows how it's going to play out. And yet God's evaluation is, that's foolish because you fail to realize what life is all about. Because you are enslaved to your stuff. You've completely missed the boat because you haven't thought about the most important evaluation of all. Not our own judgment about what's valuable, but God's judgment. For 2,000 years, the church has taught something that we don't pay a whole lot of attention to, it seems to me. And it's this, that in the end, we will all be evaluated by God for the life that we lived. We will all have to give account for how we enjoyed life, how we lived, how we treated others, how we stewarded the gifts that God has given us. We don't talk much about that because we moderns tend to think, well, we can't imagine what it's like, and because we can't imagine what it's like and wrap our heads around it, it must not be something to take seriously. But the church and the New Testament teach that we're going to be evaluated for our life one day. And if you can't get your head around that, here's something that maybe you can get your head around. At the end of your days, other people will evaluate you. At the end of your life, other people will judge your life. They will give a word about how you live. We call that a eulogy in the context of a funeral. A way of saying that this is what we saw this person's life was all about. And I find myself wondering, we're not told, of course, but what was the rich fool's eulogy? How did people judge his life? What did people have to say at his funeral? What big barns he had? How rich he was? Look at all the stuff that he acquired. And if that's all there was to say, that's tragic, isn't it? Because he shared with no one. It was all for himself. He lived for nobody, and thus there was really nothing eulogy worthy to say at his funeral. That will be all of our reality one day. We're all going to be eulogized. People will say things about us and the way we lived our lives. What will they say? Did we love God? Did we serve others? Did we reach out? Did we take risks? Did we make plans with a grain of salt, understanding that sometimes they don't work out, and take the risk to be generous anyway? Or did we keep it all because our life was all about me instead of we? The beautiful thing about what we're about to do, communion, the Lord's Supper, is that the last night of his life, Jesus gave his own eulogy. He came up with the last words that he wanted his disciples to remember about him. And what were they? We know what they were. My life for yours. I'm giving everything. Here's my body. Here's my blood. Here's my life. I have nothing left to give because it's not about possessions. It's not about me. It's my life for yours. And in this, Jesus shows us that life is not about possessions or the self. He shows us that the life most worth living is about loving God and loving others. About we, not just me.